We're going to talk about English Pace 1101. Page 30 has a challenging assignment regarding identifying all the different types of pronouns. The other challenging thing I know about this piece is that you are reading through Swiss Family Robinson, and make sure you allow time throughout there to answer those questions. And yeah, like here on page 10, there's all these questions that have to be answered and then scored, and that takes a little more time. When I have my students go through that, I allow them to set maybe some one-page goals so that they have time to do the reading and catch up. There's a lot of digging to find some of these answers. But let's talk right now about these types of pronouns on page 31. Because throughout these pages in this section, after the checkup, it talks about a pronoun, what a pronoun is. It takes the place of a noun. It talks first about the personal pronouns like I, you, me, he, she, it, they, and then even the possessive ones on page 23. So we have my, mine, your, yours, their, theirs. Okay, so those are all personal. Then we have the compound, which end in self. And then another one of the paces, they call those the reflexive pronouns because they refer back to self. And I always think of reflex, if you touch something hot and you pull your hand away, it's kind of like a reflex, that you're going to pull your hand away. And the reflexive pronouns are pointing back to self, myself, yourself, themselves, ourselves. But in this pace, they call those compound pronouns. I think it's a future pace that refers to them in the as the reflexive. Then we have the interrogative pronouns and the relative pronouns. And then there's a type called the demonstrative there on page 27. So let's take these and just give you a little clue of how to keep them straight, all right? So the first one is personal. And those are the ones that we use the most often. I, me, you. And that's usually what students, even coming in at the junior high level, elementary, they think of pronouns as just being those, all right? So those are the entry-level pronouns. So let's assume that those are fairly easy. Let's talk about the compound ones. Those also should be fairly easy because they end in the word self or selves. And like I mentioned in some of the paces, they're also called reflexive. And I always picture that as your hand coming back to yourself when you touch something hot, reflex. Then we have the interrogative. An interrogative means asking questions. Who, what, when, where, okay, why, and all of those, and they start the sentence with that pronoun, and it's asking a question. Now, what's interesting is those same words also introduce relative phrases. Relative clauses describe a noun, and we'll start with the same word. Who, what, whom, where, okay, which. So let's say, let's take a student's name. Fred gave his lunch to Susie, who did not bring a lunch. So that phrase, who did not bring a lunch, is not asking a question, it's relating it back to Susie. And so it is a relative pronoun, it's relating it back. So relative, relate, it relates a clause that's coming to a noun that's in front of it. So it's being used as an adjective. If you were to draw an arrow from that clause, it would be pointing to a noun. So we'll think of that as an adjective clause, and it starts with the same words as the interrogative, okay? So that's a clue that always helps me. Then let's talk about demonstrative. And when I think of demonstrative, I picture, have you ever seen some of those that look like hands, No, that's not a very good picture, sorry. It looks like a big finger, and it's pointing to something, this pen, that board, those flags, this pace. So if you go back and look at page 27, it points out that this, that, these, and those are demonstrative pronouns when used to point out particular persons, places, or things. And so it's like pointing at something. So if you can picture one of those big foam fingers pointing at a noun, this pencil, that book, those students, then that's demonstrating or pointing to that. And then the last type mentioned here is the indefinite. So the indefinite pronouns, and there's a list of them here on page 29. And to me, these always sound like I'm reading a mystery. Someone did it. Nobody knew who did it. Everybody knew that somebody did it, but nobody would confess, and nothing was found out, and everything. You see these generic words that don't tell us about somebody specific or a specific thing, but it's just kind of open-ended, so it's indefinite. There's a whole list of them here, and you're probably, if you look at them, they all have the kind of that in common, that it's kind of nebulous and would be used to tell kind of a mysterious statement. Some are plural, some are singular. Okay, so as you're going through, and again, I would take the ones that are most familiar to you and answer those first, and then go back and find the ones that are not as common, not as familiar to you, and try to fill those in. And I think on the self-test, there is a similar section here on page 34 where you have to go through and find the nouns and identify whether it's personal, compound, asking a question, interrogative, demonstrative, pointing to something, relative. Remember, those are the same words as the interrogative, just used to introduce a clause, and then those indefinite ones. All right, so I hope that helps you a little bit and that you'll be successful when you do that section in your PACE and the self-test.